Hello. Okay, I just request that can you just keep a power slide mode on for the screen? I need a slideshow, Dr. Lavanya. Yeah, sure. Hello. Yeah. I can see on my screen. It is okay. It is okay. Okay, so should I start with the session? Okay. So very good evening to all who are present for this webinar. And this session has been given a forecast for taking within the help of all India homeopathic, the associations of the students and the youth. And I'm very thankful for the organizers from the BJain and all the co-organizing team of the AIHSYA who had made this event witness in my particular series of webinars. So, confounders in homeopathy are a burning topic in this upcoming era for the research. Now, many of you would be able to question it out that what exactly are the confounders? Number one. Number two, why should we be more concerned about those confounders? So, before moving for this session, I would like to give you feedback about why this topic has been discussed in the students' webinar. So, in the year 1997, the literatures in the scientific field had a lot of impact on homeopathy. If you try to understand from the database of PubMed Google Scholar, you all can search in that particular database that the meta-analysis studies of homeopathy, and you will analyze in the year of 1997 1998 many of the researchers from Germany, from Switzerland had portrayed that how these homeopathic medicines are shown as a placebo effect. Now the question comes up that is this methodology correctly been rigorously followed with the data collection? Point number one. The second is if its data is verified, then is the association between the data is how much truly positive or truly negative. So in the year 1997, the researchers have commented that the homeopathic medicines are nothing more than similar like a placebo. And in 2005, A similar study was conducted by Shang et al. Group, wherein the complete analysis was compared of the treatment line of homeopathic medicine with conventional medicine. So you all can get this data and you can understand the conclusive part of what all these researchers wanted to convey. So we understand one thing is the dogma of the science is always keeping homeopathy based on the effects which are experientially followed by the practitioners. सिंपल भाषा में अगर बता दूं तो एक्सपीरियंस जिनके पेशेंट्स के लाइन ऑफ ट्रीटमेंट में बहुत बार जिन्होंने देखा है कि ये इफेक्ट्स होम्योपैथी के कैसे उनको मिलते हैं. The question depends whether it is the medicine which is giving them this particular effects or whether it is the particular concerning counseling which is going throughout the case taking through this particular effects. The psychological parameters do matter in homeopathy and similarly the other parameters too. So first let us understand what exactly is the confounders, then its definition, then we'll go with some examples so that you all can understand that why this particular thing is triggered in this particular session. So please can you change the slide? Okay. So what do you mean by confounders? Now let us understand some a definition which is statistically been exempted in this, explained. A confounder is a variable that influences both the independent variable and the dependent variable. The confounder is that variable which is not independent, not dependent, but it influences both the variables, okay, in a study, creating a misleading association between them. So in other words, it's an outside factor that can distort the true relationship between what's been studied and the effect being measured. Next slide, please. So if we try to understand the confounders through an example, so I have portrayed one example. So for example, in a study on a new medication, age could be a confounder if it affects both the likelihood of receiving the treatment and the health outcome. If older people are more likely to take the medications and also more likely to experience health problems, it can make the medication appear less effective than it really is. So in this particular example, if you try to understand, the age factor can act as a confounder for new medication. If you are looking for an outcome wherein you want to see that particularly the medication has the effect in a true positive or not, so for that the age group matters. In earlier age group you will definitely get lot of impacts, lot of effects. The reason is in old age usually there is a delay in the particular metabolism conditions, so the effect of these particular drugs might show delayed as compared with the elderly group. Next slide, please. So this is just a gist of example. Now let us understand why confounders are important in research. क्यों हमें इसके बारे में सीखना है? Number one, confounders are crucial in research because they can significantly impact the validity and reliability of study results. So अगर आप कोई भी research study conduct कर रहे हो, so for conducting a research study you need to justify the study design. The study design is justified based on the literature review you have received from the data which you have screened from various databases. Our next point is to ensure accurate results. So whatever you are going to study, your results should portray the similar effects when a particular researcher or a practitioner is implementing the same particular study design in its own practice. Third, to reduce biasness. Fourth, to improve generalizability. Fifth, to strengthen causal inferences. Then sixth, to support ethical decision making. Seven, to increase statistically validity. and 8 to avoid misleading conclusions, and 9 is to maintain scientific rigor. Next slide, please. So, why were these important? Okay, now let us understand the question, how confounders can occur in homeopathic research. Confounders हमें कैसे मिल सकते हैं या ये कैसे होते हैं रिसर्च करते वक्त. So the first example, before giving you this, the brief introduction which I gave you about the year 1997, kindly keep this in your mindset because I am going to reflect the same example in the upcoming slides in my conclusion part also, so that you will all understand the parameters how these researchers are working. So the first thing is, if your study design is non-randomized. Okay, now what is the meaning of non-randomized study design? Let us understand. Example, a study comparing the effectiveness of a homeopathic remedy for migraines in patients who self-selected the treatment versus those who did not. So in this particular condition, if you have not randomly allocated the participants, so what will happen? Patients choosing homeopathy might already believe in its efficacy, influencing the outcomes through placebo effects. So this is one of the factors wherein the confounders can be identified. Next slide, please. Now, the second is unmeasured variables. Now, what do you mean by unmeasured variables? Example, a trial investigating homeopathic remedies for arthritis might not account for participants' levels of physical activity. If those using homeopathy are more physically active, the observed benefit might be due to exercise, not the remedy. So what do you mean by unmeasured variables is, it is very keen to understand that whenever you are testing homeopathic medicine based on the arthritic like conditions, so in that particular condition you need to consider the age factor too. If you are treating this particular condition within the elderly group and who are physically active, the definitely it will reflect the particular effects. Next slide, please. Then you have correlation between variables. So example, a study links homeopathy use with reduced anxiety levels. However, patients using homeopathy might also engage in meditations or yoga, confounding the relationship as these activities independently reduce anxiety. So this is one of the example. Okay. Next slide, please. Then you have imbalance in baseline characteristics. Example, a trial on homeopathic treatment for allergies might have younger participants in the homeopathic group and older participants in the control group. So again, you need to understand the age factors. So younger individuals might naturally recover faster, skewing the results in favor of homeopathy. Okay, next slide, please. Complex relationships. So in a study of homeopathic remedies for insomnia, stress levels might act as a confounder. So stress can influence both the likelihood of using homeopathy as a stress reduction strategy and the severity of insomnia, complicating the interpretation. So this also might be a particular instances wherein you can identify the confounders. Next slide, please. Selection bias. So a study comparing the outcomes of patients visiting homeopaths versus conventional doctors for skin conditions might find better results in the homeopathic group. However, these patients might have milder conditions to begin with due to self-selections. So selection bias might be one of the criteria for confounders to be identified. Next slide, please. Overlapping risk factors. So example is like research investigating the effects of homeopathy on chronic pain might not control for socio-economic factors. Patients using homeopathy might have better access to complementary therapies, healthier diets, or higher health awareness influencing outcomes. So overlapping risk will always be initiated within the multiple outcomes of a therapy, wherein you need to understand the variables by stratifying their effects. Next slide, please. So, after identifying confounders in homeopathic research. What action we need to be initiated? So the first thing is you have to select the correct study design adjustments. Like use randomization to evenly distribute confounders between treatment and control groups. Example, randomly assign participants to a homeopathic group or a placebo group to minimize bias from factors like age or belief in homeopathy. Next slide. Restrictions. So limit the study population to exclude participants with certain confounding characteristics. Example, restrict the study to non-smokers if smoking is a confounder in a study on homeopathy and respiratory health. So if you're doing any study wherein you are trying to associate the effects of homeopathy with the respiratory health conditions, so you shouldn't be taking the smoking group people because that is the additional factor which will always trigger it. So you can restrict to the non-smokers, wherein you will understand the correct implementation of the action of the medicines. Next slide, please. Matching. Now, match participants in treatment and control groups based on confounders to ensure comparability. Example, match participants by age, gender, or stress levels in a homeopathy study for anxiety. So you need to compare whenever you are doing any particular study, the factors should be similar. So that is also an important part in your selection of the patients plus your particular recruitment process of your clinical trials. Next slide, please. Data collection strategies. So major confounders. So collect data on potential confounders to adjust for them during analysis. Example, record dietary habits in a study on homeopathic remedies for digestive disorders. Ensure adequate sample size. Increase the sample size to allow for stratified analysis or multivariable adjustment for confounders. Next slide, please. Statistical techniques. So, as I said in my previous slide, you need to stratify the thing. Stratification. What does it mean? Analyzes the relationship between the homeopathic intervention and the outcome within subgroups defined by the confounders. Example, separate analysis by socioeconomic status in a study on homeopathy for chronic pain. So, socioeconomic status might be a confounder, wherein chronic pain might be a particular outcome to be tested. So it might be that in a particularly wealthier family, you might not get so much of the intensity of the pains as compared to the socioeconomic level below poverty line, the groups, because the chances of having the additional environmental balancing about the comfort within the treatment line, providing the other supportive measures, might be physiotherapy and all, it would be easily possible for the groups which are higher in the socioeconomic patterns. So you need to compare that too when you're doing for the trials. Next slide, please. Multivariable regressions. So use regression models to control for multiple confounders simultaneously. So whenever you are identifying the confounders, you have to compare it with various models. Please understand. Example, apply logistic regression to adjust for stress, sleep quality and diet in a study on homeopathy and migraines. So if you're studying any particular drug on the migraine and whether you want to see the effects, so you need to compare that drug in the particular patient of the migraine based on its stress level, its sleep quality and diet. So this is multiple variables you are trying to understand, and so that you can get correct accuracy whether it is due to the confounders association or not. Next slide, please. Propensity score matching. So match participants based on their likelihoods of receiving the homeopathic treatment given the confounders. So you need to initially intimate that what might be the possibility of this particular study designs and the outcomes. Then sensitive analysis. Test how sensitive the results are to unmeasured or residual confounders to assess the robustness of conclusions. So you need to test your analysis sensitivity too, that whether you have taken the outcome of the independent variables as compared to dependent variables, how much accurate are the results. Next slide, please. Interpretation and reporting. So in report adjusted results, present findings after adjusting for confounders and provide both unadjusted and adjusted estimates for transparency. You need to compare before and after data to understand whether the study patterns have been correctly initiated or not. Then acknowledge limitations. Definitely, you need to understand the limitation of your study design too. And so you need to conclude too on that basis. So discuss any unmeasured confounders and their potential impact on results. Example, highlight cultural beliefs about homeopathy that weren't directly measured. So understanding the participants' concept about homeopathy before taking the line of treatment. So that also matters. That why is that particular participant coming for the treatment or for the clinical trial? It's just because of the sponsorship of the trial. It's because of the safety data of the trials. It's because of the cost reduction in the treatment line of the trial. You need to justify this. Then validate findings. Use independent data sets or conduct follow-up studies. Confirm that the adjusted results hold true. So after understanding these parameters, you need to re-verify whether your assumptions were correct or not. And for that, you need to interpret and report the confounders. Next slide, please. Communication of results. So clearly explain how confounders were identified and managed in the study design and analysis. Demonstrate that the observed effects are genuinely attributable to the homeopathic interventions and not confounding factors. Ultimately, you need to convey that whatever research you have done in your study design, that needs to be reflected with the outcomes, and it should be based on how did you identify the confounders and how have you handled that. That needs to be descriptively explained in your research trials plus in your particular research paper when you're going for ahead of the publication. Next slide, please. Okay, so let me give you the gist of the presentation. So before, I wanted to convey about the particular impacts of the confounders. I have given an example of 1997 research study. Now, let me give you the timeline about how this particular research has changed the algorithm of homeopathic science. In the year 1997, the researchers portrayed that the homeopathic trials are confirming more about the placebo effects. In 2005, it reconfirmed the similar pattern of the study wherein the two particular trials were compared based on homeopathic and conventional medicine. In 2008, a research paper was debatedly written about the biasness of this particular meta-analysis study conducted by the researchers. In 2010, a committee had set the designing protocols wherein you will understand the Australian government plus Switzerland government, they both have completely been debating upon the effects of homeopathy, and followed with the various research personalities, their names were identified. Then in 2014, Robert T. Mathis, sir, he had written a meta-analysis wherein the individualized homeopathic medicine was taken into consideration, its effect. Then in 2017, the non-individualized homeopathic medicine and its effect. Then in 2024, like in today's era, the comparative analysis of the studies they have explained. And they have verified that the studies which were conducted in the year 1997-2005 had the lacunae of the study design wherein the propagation of homeopathy as a placebo was perceived on a false, or you can say a logical falses based on their data sets. But in today's scenario, for everyone who is attending this webinar, I would like to highlight you all that the complete committee members of the HRI plus the LMHI members and the CCRH of the Government of India, they have shown that these homeopathic medicines are superior than this placebo, and what all data has been confirmed from the past years, they have rectified it and they have made it sure that the correct study design, if we are implementing, identifying the confounders, then the all trials are supporting the evidences for the homeopathy, provided that the effect sample size and the heterogeneity of the data is excluded. So, for the viewers, if anyone would like to understand more about the confounders, or if you want to have more details about how you need to identify when you are designing your study for the clinical trials, or you wanted the references of what all slide today I have shared about the data, you can scan this particular QR code wherein you will get all the data of what current research we are working within our particular technical team members of the THRS, followed with what collaboration work we are doing within the research publication sector, within the patents, within the IP rights. You can mail us on this particular email ID too for the particular questions which you need to verify. It might be a clinical trial question, might be a case reporting question, might be any particular biasness or the data wherein you want to identify that the correct sequence of interpretation of the results. So the Tech Home Research Solution is a particular community wherein we try to help the upcoming homeopaths, the budding, the future of this particular field, and the existing homeopaths about upgrading their particular effects and providing the justice towards this field. So I hope so. If we have any questions, we can move ahead. Over to you, Dr. Lavanya. Yeah, yeah. So the quantitative and qualitative research, these both parameters depends on the outcomes you are trying to write in your research papers. Okay. So first I will talk about the qualitative data. Now for qualitative data, the first thing you need to understand is the sequence of series of a particular variable which you are trying to identify. Example, restlessness, it's a rubric which is found in belladonna. Okay. So what we usually do is we try to search our materia medica pura, we try to search the repertorial analysis, the books wherein this particular association is been highlighted with the gradings. Now we are having other remedies too for this particular analysis of this rubric. But for every confirming patient of the belladonna, of the all over age group, that needs to be justified. Because in our provings, it has written that this provings has been justified throughout the all age, about the sexes and the genders. But we don't have a numerical data. So in qualitative data, you need to justify the statement by associating it within the correlation of the effects. And qualitative data is little bit difficult to identifying the confounders because various experiential the physicians plus their particular aspects has been based on their thoughts provided within the experiential effects what they have seen in their time zones. Now speaking with the quantitative data. In quantitative data, the study design matters a lot. Like I was speaking for about the meta-analysis studies, you need to separately identify the variables what has been tested in the clinical trial and their particular outcome what they wanted to justify. It's like example, if I want to test whether a homeopathic medicine is suitable for the treatment of, you can say, acute conditions, or if I were to say acute allergic rhinitis. Okay, so I need to quantify my statements first, that whether want to see that homeopathic medicines association within the allergic conditions of the immunoglobulins, I need to verify, number one. Number two, I need to verify the data of daily life impact. So in quantitative analysis, the association should always be in identify the confounders based on the selection criteria of your patient. Now this is just a one particular thought process. The trial design will define the inclusion and exclusion criteria, and for that you need to understand the review of literature process. So you have to go in back of the time to see how the data has been analyzed, how it has been explored, how the results has been justified. If a particular data set explains you that the homeopathic effects are been showing in this particular trial, you need to see the sample size of that trial. If the sample size is 30 patients, and if the conclusion of that particular research paper is conveyed that the homeopathy is showing the therapeutic effects, then your sample size analysis is very small. So you need to increase the sample size to see the replication of this particular process. So these things you need to identify based on the previous documented evidences which has been portrayed in this particular field of the research. Yeah. Any next questions, ma'am? Yeah. Now see, sample size is completely another topic, but I will just give you a hint that there are two possibilities where I want to decide my sample size. Possibility number one, that if I want to trace a particular drug which is already in the market. Possibility two, I want to invent a particular drug. So in situation one, like the first possibility, the drug is already present in the market. Okay. So if the drug is already present in the market, I need to go the data of that drug for all the trials which have been conducted. Example, if I want to see aconite napellus 30C effects on insomnia, okay, so I need to have the initial data of aconite napellus which has been tested in insomnia trials. So in the existing drug, you will identify the previous data about that research papers, about how many sample size they have taken in their study. So in the existing literature, you will able to understand if a particular study of aconite, considering about 60 sample size, is showing that it treats the insomnia like condition. So in your study, in the existing sample size, you need to go for the consideration of the error margin, about how much you are going to consider it, and the formulation of the sample size which have been conducted in the RM studies. Now, in situation number two, wherein the total drug is different, let's consider that Aconite napellus third generation species is coming in new in the market. Like a European Federation has declared in their pharmacopoeia that they are going to justify with some new species identifying, comparing within the pharmacopoeia. It's just an example, hypothetically, I'm trying to give you all. Okay. So, for the new drug, the sample size is not justified based on the existing literature because we don't have any information. We only have the phytochemical information, number one. Number two, we only have the physiochemical information about the drugs. And with that, we are trying to correlate that this might be the possible activity of this drug, which might be proven in the human clinical trials. Example, similarly like aconite napellus third species generation, if it is flavonoids or its particular phytochemical is showing that it can have the effects on a particular, you can say, a diuretic. Okay, so to confirm the diuretic levels, I need to have a data priorly based on the existing diuretic drugs which have been used. And for particular studies, your quasi-experimental design comes prior, and after that it goes towards your pilot studies, expanding the sample size. So initially you can go with a 10, considering with all the justified evidences about the particular study designs what you were trying to portray. And further, again, as per the RM studies, you can just go with the formula of sample size. It always depends upon the existing literature data and the outcome what you are want to test it. So you might have gone with similar formulas wherein the n is equal to, wherein we are trying to portray the error of considering 5%, 10% or 2.5 based on the literature previously, and then you try to calculate. Sometimes it give initially about the numerical number of 275, somewhere in the 365 about the initial trials, but that is based completely on the algorithm what the sample size calculator says. But you need to justify that why so much of patient you wanted to study in this particular field, and for that reason also you need to identify the confounders. So that is what it explains the clarity of this thing. Anything else, ma'am? Yeah, yeah. This session is too much of qualitative understanding, but it is very important for us, like in upcoming times, that we need to understand these parameters. Because in today's scenario, many of the researchers I have seen, they are writing research papers completely within the framework of the papers which have a biased conclusions. And it is very difficult to convey those thought processes because not many are understanding the concept, the topic, and many of the time it happens that the real world scenario of the results, it always needs to be replicated based on a clinical practice. That is the actual impact of the research. If we are not able to get that particular evidences, or you can say the results, it means the whole process of that particular research, it had a particular biasness, or there were very early conclusions pretended throughout the study design. So in homeopathy we all actually need to learn this, we need to develop this habit, we need to design it, we need to re-understand, we need to make mistakes in how to identifying it. The workshop should be conducted all over the India wherein the things need to be very clarified. Because publishing a research paper is not an important task. The important task is about providing the genuine information. That is very difficult. Anyone can publish a research paper. Number doesn't count. It's the value towards your particular research which will cite your work throughout your legacy. Okay, that is what actually I wanted to conclude with this session. Yeah. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Okay, okay, definitely we will plan for it. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, yeah, yeah.